I stepped onto the gala stage and locked eyes with my parents, who hadn't seen me in a decade, and watched my mother freeze as she realized I owned the company. Hey there, wherever you are, folding laundry, taking a walk, lying in bed with your earbuds in, thanks for pressing play. I've got a story for you today. A story about family, silence, and what happens when you choose your own path, even when it means walking away from everything familiar. Have you ever made a decision that cost you the people you love? Have you ever stood alone and wondered if it was worth it? Today's story follows Rachel Monroe, who did just that. Stick around until the end to see how she rebuilt her life, her voice, and maybe, just maybe, her place in a world that once shut her out. And hey, if you enjoy these stories, hit subscribe. It's a small click, but it means the world. Now, let's begin.
I'm Rachel Monroe. I'm 31, and if you had asked my family 10 years ago where I'd be today, they'd have given you 3 answers: med school, married, and miserable. Instead, I'm standing behind the velvet curtain of a hotel ballroom in San Francisco, about to take the stage as the creative director of a game studio I built from nothing. The spotlights warm my skin, my name's on the program, and the crowd is buzzing. Somewhere out there, sipping overpriced Chardonnay, are my parents, Catherine and Franklin Monroe. They don't know I'm here. They don't know I own the company. They think they're attending a tech gala hosted by ScriptForge Interactive. They have no idea I am ScriptForge. Wild, right? Before I tell you what happened when they finally saw me again, face to face after nearly a decade of silence, I need to tell you how we got here. Growing up in the Monroe household meant living in a cathedral of expectations. My father, Franklin, was a decorated neurosurgeon who lectured at Harvard and played golf with senators. My mother, Catherine, ran charity galas like military campaigns and still found time to correct my posture at every dinner table. We weren't just expected to be successful, we were expected to be perfect. My older brother Daniel was exactly that. Top of his class at Yale, now a high-powered attorney in New York, married to a woman with perfect teeth and 0 opinions. My younger sister Lillian was the golden child. Private ballet lessons, social media influencer before it was a job, married at 23 to the son of a hospital board member. And then there was me, middle child, quiet, bookish, obsessed with worlds that didn't exist. While Daniel argued for fun and Lillian auditioned for school plays, I was scribbling storylines in spiral notebooks and building pixelated dungeons in modded games. I didn't want to be on stage. I wanted to write the script. Of course, that wasn't acceptable. "You have too much potential to waste it on fantasy," my mother would say, rearranging the flowers in the dining room for the 3rd time. Medicine, law, those are careers, not whatever this is. I used to hide my stories under the mattress. Sometimes I think they would have been less horrified if they'd caught me with drugs. Still, I played along. I enrolled in pre-med at Stanford like a good daughter. I shadowed surgeons. I memorized anatomy terms. I told myself that I could do this, that I should do this. I lasted 5 semesters. What finally broke me wasn't blood or burnout. It was watching a patient flatline and seeing the surgeon frown, not with grief, but annoyance. Another delay in the schedule, another number, another missed dinner reservation. I went home that night and cried into my pillow for hours. Then I opened my laptop and submitted my application to a writing program I'd been eyeing in secret. I didn't even wait for a response. I withdrew from Stanford the next day. When I told my parents, we were at brunch. A family friend had just praised Lillian's engagement photos. My mother was beaming. My father was halfway through his Bloody Mary. "I'm leaving med school," I said. "I want to write for games, interactive storytelling." You could have heard a pin drop, or maybe the sound of a career crashing through 1,000 expectations. "What are you talking about?" my father said, blinking slowly like he'd misheard. "You're confused," my mother said. "Everyone has doubts. You'll go back after the semester." "No," I said, louder this time. "I'm done. I've already left." Franklin Monroe didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He used silence like a scalpel. "If you walk out of this family's future, Rachel," he said coldly, "you walk out of this family." And I did. That night, I packed my life into the back seat of a 2007 Civic and drove west with a refurbished laptop, 2 suitcases, and $612 in my checking account. No goodbye hugs, no voicemails, no looking back. I lived in my car for 2 weeks, showered at gyms, ate from vending machines, took freelance gigs that paid pennies, but I kept writing. Dialogue trees, quests, lore dumps, anything to keep the dream alive. It would have been easier to give up. Sometimes I wanted to, but giving up would have meant they were right. Next time, I'll tell you about how I met Maricel Vega, the woman who changed everything. But for now, tell me, if your family told you that chasing your dream made you worthless, would you still chase it? Let's find out together. People romanticize rock bottom. They act like it's some kind of transformative chrysalis where you emerge stronger, wiser, somehow grateful for the suffering. That's bullshit. Rock bottom smells like stale air freshener in a 24-hour laundromat, tastes like cup noodles 3 times a day, and sounds like your bank app telling you you're down to $13.78. I wasn't becoming anything magical. I was just trying to survive. I took every freelance gig I could find, punch-up work on indie games, narrative consulting for mobile puzzle apps, once even wrote dialogue for an online dating simulator where all the characters were frogs. I'd laugh if I hadn't needed that money so badly. Every night, I'd park on a quiet street in Oakland, crack the windows just enough not to suffocate, and pray my laptop wouldn't get stolen from the trunk. During the day, I'd rotate between coffee shops with working outlets and decent Wi-Fi, nursing the same iced coffee for hours while pretending I belonged. I wasn't special. I wasn't on the verge. I was tired, broke, and scared out of my mind. And then came Maricel Vega. I met her at a small developer mixer I almost didn't go to because I couldn't afford the $10 cover. I'd printed business cards at the library that morning, thick cardstock was extra, and wore the only blazer I hadn't donated. I figured I'd network for an hour, smile until my face hurt, and maybe pick up another frog project. Maricel didn't look like anyone else in the room. While everyone else wore hoodies and sneakers, she had a sharp blazer over a silk jumpsuit, silver streaks in her tightly coiled hair, and a gaze that could cut glass. She didn't work the room, she owned it. We met by the snack table, which felt both humiliating and cosmic. "You look like you're thinking about stealing the last shrimp roll," she said, eyebrow raised. "I was negotiating with myself," I admitted. "If I eat it, I can't call myself a professional." She laughed. "Only amateurs go hungry to look respectable. I'm Maricel, Vega Studios." I blinked. Vega Studios was legendary in indie game circles. Artful storytelling, strong female leads, games that actually made people feel things. "Rachel," I managed. "I write, mostly narrative design." She asked to see my work. I pulled up a sample on my cracked phone screen. She read it, right there by the pretzels, nodding slowly. "Want a shot at something real?" she asked. I thought it was a joke. But 2 days later, I was in her office, tiny, cluttered, alive. She threw me into the deep end, revamping the narrative for a half-built fantasy adventure that had beautiful art and a plot like wet cardboard. I worked 14-hour days. She tore my first 3 drafts to pieces, but she always gave feedback that made me better. "You're good," she said one night, eyes on the script, "but you're too polite. Stop writing like you want their approval. Start writing like the story deserves to exist." That sentence rewired my brain. 6 months in, I wasn't just ghostwriting. I was lead narrative designer. We shipped a short game that hit big on Steam, and for the first time, I saw my name in credits. It felt surreal, like I'd snuck into a future I wasn't meant to see. But Marisol didn't let me stay comfortable. She pushed me to learn the business side, budgets, timelines, team management, marketing. If you want to tell stories your way, she said, you need to build the structure to hold them. So I learned, and then I built. 2 years later, I launched ScriptForge Interactive. I started with just me and a UX guy I met in a subreddit. We worked out of my apartment, ate instant ramen, pitched to anyone who'd listen. The first few projects barely broke even, but the fourth one hit. Fracture, a psychological mystery set in a near-future city, went viral. Players streamed it. Critics praised it. We won an indie storytelling award that no one in my family would have ever heard of, but it meant everything to me. Suddenly, I wasn't just a writer. I was a founder, a CEO, a creator. I hired a team. We rented an actual office. We wore real shoes to work. My name was in industry press. My inbox was full of pitches, and investors started to call. Still, I kept waiting for the ground to fall out from under me. Because here's the thing about trauma, it doesn't care about your LinkedIn. It whispers that it's all temporary, that the success is a mistake and your failure is inevitable. And sometimes it shows up in your notifications. One night, late at the office, I got an email from a professional event planner. Invitation to Franklin and Catherine Monroe 40th Anniversary Gala at the Valiant Hotel, hosted by ScriptForge Interactive. I stared at the screen like it had grown teeth. My parents, at my event? They had no idea I was behind it. Apparently, the gala had gone through a partner agency, a networking event for tech and storytelling executives, a chance for old world professionals to meet the new wave. My team handled everything: anonymous invites, VIP passes. Of course my parents would attend. They lived for those circles. And they had no clue that their estranged daughter was the keynote speaker. My first instinct was panic. Cancel the invite, hide. Let them be there, enjoy the wine, and never know. But that's not who I am anymore. The woman I've become doesn't vanish when they enter the room. She writes the story, and this one was just getting interesting. The ballroom shimmered in gold and low amber lighting, the kind meant to make everyone feel more expensive. My team had outdone themselves. ScriptForge's logo gleamed in chrome on the stage backdrop, centerpieces flickered with embedded LED fireflies, and trays of custom cocktails floated through the crowd like satellites orbiting egos. I should have been proud. I was proud. But pride has a funny way of twisting into dread when your past walks in wearing cufflinks. I spotted them instantly, my parents. Catherine glided through the room in a floor-length navy gown, hair up, pearls resting at her collarbone like punctuation. Franklin was just behind her, checking his phone even as he greeted strangers with the cool precision of someone who'd shaken 1,000 hands and remembered none. They didn't recognize me. Not at first. I was on stage when it happened. The room went quiet as the light shifted and my name, Rachel Monroe, founder and creative director, flashed on the screen. I stepped into view, heart thundering behind my ribs like a trapped bird. For a second, I scanned the crowd. And then I saw my mother's face. She didn't gasp. She didn't drop her drink. She simply froze, perfectly still, like someone hit pause. My father turned slowly, followed her gaze, and blinked like his eyes were adjusting to a reality that shouldn't exist. I took a breath and started my speech. Stories aren't just fiction, they're survival. They're how we remember who we are and how we decide who we want to be next. The applause was generous, the kind that rolls politely and ends with a few people rising because they think they should. I smiled, bowed slightly, and walked off stage, pulse still hammering. I wasn't hiding anymore. The after-party was held on the rooftop, under strings of soft white lights and a sky too smoggy to see stars. I stayed near the edge, nursing a whiskey and trying to avoid small talk. But I felt them coming before I saw them. "Rachel," my father said, voice low and formal, like he was introducing a patient to bad news. I turned. Dad, Mom. My mother nodded slightly, as if we were passing in a museum. She trailed off, eyes scanning me as if my success were a puzzle she couldn't quite solve. "Well," Franklin cleared his throat, "we didn't know this was your company." "No, you didn't," I said evenly. "I figured that out around the shrimp tower." A long pause stretched between us, filled with all the things they weren't saying. Regret, disbelief, ego. Finally, my father said, "You've built something impressive." I raised an eyebrow. "You thought I'd fail?" He didn't deny it. "We thought you were confused." I wasn't. My mother's jaw tightened, but she didn't look away. "Why didn't you reach out?" "Why would I? You told me if I left, I wasn't part of the family anymore." I just listened. Her lips parted, then pressed into a tight line. My words hadn't shocked her. They'd confirmed something she already knew, but never said out loud. Just then, a younger voice cut through the tension. "Aunt Rachel?" I turned, and there she was, Ivy. 14 now, maybe 15, with a mess of dark curls and a hopeful expression that nearly shattered me. I hadn't seen her since she was a toddler, all giggles and juice-stained fingers. "Ivy," I said, stunned. "Hi." "I knew it was you," she beamed. "I saw your name on the program and told Mom, but she said it must be someone else." Ivy's mother, Lillian, hovered a few feet back, drink in hand, eyes wary. "I'm glad you came," I told her. "You look like you're about to take over the world." She laughed. "I want to learn to make games, real ones, not those cheesy apps they make us code at school." I smiled, despite the weight still pressing on my chest. "You will." A moment later, she was whisked away by Lillian, but the crack she left in the wall between me and my parents remained. Franklin glanced at the city skyline, then back at me. "We should talk, really talk." I considered it. Maybe we would, but not tonight. I'd already taken the stage once. That was enough exposure for one evening. "Maybe," I said, "if we start with the truth." They didn't reply, but neither did they leave. And that silence? It wasn't rejection. It was the beginning of something else. A week after the gala, I received a formal invitation, printed, embossed, painfully tasteful. "The Monroe family requests the honor of your presence for a private dinner." It was signed by my mother. I almost tossed it. The idea of sitting across from them, clinking glasses like we hadn't detonated a decade's worth of silence, felt surreal. But something about the phrase, "requests the honor," made me pause. My family didn't request. They commanded. This was different. So I said yes. Not because I wanted closure. I'd stopped believing in that years ago. I said yes because I wanted context. I wanted to see who they'd become, if they'd changed, or if I had simply outgrown the fantasy that they ever would. The dinner was held at my parents' home in Pacific Heights, a mansion with sweeping bay views, marble floors, and the emotional temperature of a boardroom. The same house I left at 21 with nothing but a duffel bag and a laptop. Catherine greeted me at the door in a crisp ivory blouse and diamond studs. Franklin stood behind her, stiff but neutral, the way men stand when they're not sure if they're welcoming you or about to be deposed. "Rachel," my mother said, "you look different." "I'm older," I replied. She didn't laugh. She never liked jokes she didn't control. Inside, the table was set like a magazine spread. Linen napkins, crystal glasses, 5 forks. A silent nod to a perfection they'd weaponized my entire life. Lillian and Daniel were already seated, with their spouses. Ivy sat between them, looking nervous and excited in equal parts. There were name cards. Mine said, "Miss Rachel Monroe," as if this were a wedding I'd stumbled into uninvited. We made it through appetizers in near silence, the clinking of utensils louder than the conversation. Finally, Daniel cleared his throat. "So," he said carefully, "Script Forge is really something. I checked out your latest release, Mirror Loop, right?" I nodded. "Yeah, thanks." He hesitated. "It's emotionally layered. Kind of brutal, actually." "It's about generational control," I said plainly. "Power passed down like an heirloom no one wants." The table went quiet. Franklin set his fork down. "You always were dramatic." "No," I corrected him. "You just never listened." Dessert brought wine, and wine brought honesty, at least from my siblings. Daniel admitted he'd envied me. "You left, you got out. The rest of us just adapted." Lillian, twisting her ring around her finger, finally confessed, "Tom's cheating, has been for years. But if I divorce him, Dad pulls my trust." Catherine flinched. "You knew?" I asked, looking at Franklin. He didn't deny it. "It's not simple." "No," I said. "It's convenient." Ivy, barely holding in her frustration, finally burst out, "Why is everyone pretending this is normal?" The room stilled. The question no one wanted asked had been spoken by the youngest among us. "Ivy," Catherine said tightly, "this isn't your concern." "Yes, it is," she said. "You all treat Rachel like she's radioactive, but she's the only one who seems to be actually living." I stared at her, this fierce, bright girl who hadn't learned yet that in our family, speaking up comes with consequences. "Ivy," I said softly, "how's school?" She looked at me gratefully. "I hate it. I'm good at math and science, but what I love is storytelling, games, animation. I want to make things, but Mom says it's impractical." Lillian went pale. I took a breath. Funny, that's exactly what they told me, right before they cut me off. Catherine stood abruptly. This dinner was a mistake. "No," I said, standing with her. "It was overdue." That night, after the guests left, I stayed. Franklin found me in the sunroom, the same one where I used to sneak in with a notebook and headphones, scripting scenes in my head while pretending to study. He stood by the window, staring out at the city. "I saw your keynote," he said. "Twice, actually. Online." I said nothing. "You're good. Better than I expected." High praise. He admitted, "I was wrong about a lot of things." It didn't feel like victory. It felt like air leaving the room. "I wanted structure for you, stability. I didn't realize that for some people, structure is a cage." I looked at him, really looked at him. His posture was still straight, but the lines around his mouth were deeper. His hands trembled slightly when he pressed them to the window frame. "You could have called," I said. I thought it was too late. It almost was. Later, Catherine joined us. She handed me a cup of tea, prepared exactly the way I used to like it. Lemon, no sugar, no milk. The fact that she remembered that detail after 10 years hit me harder than I expected. "I wanted to protect you," she said quietly, "but I realize now I was protecting myself from the fear that maybe you were right." "I wasn't right," I said. "I was just willing to bet on myself." We sat there, 3 people who'd once called each other family, now orbiting the same memory like planets trying not to collide. I didn't know what came next. I wasn't ready to forgive, but I could see, clearly for the first time, that they weren't villains. They were just people, flawed, scared, and finally, maybe ready to listen. A week after the dinner, I invited them over. To my space this time. Not the studio, not the hotel ballroom, not some neutral turf where everyone had to behave like corporate diplomats. No, this was personal. My loft sat above a converted firehouse in the Mission District. Exposed brick, too many plants, and a bookshelf that doubled as a brag wall, awards, press clips, a first edition game cartridge from a title I'd written under a pseudonym. I'd built this place one paycheck, one script, one breakdown at a time. I made pasta. Nothing fancy. I didn't want to impress them. I wanted them to sit in my home and feel what it was like to be surrounded by choices I had made, not ones they curated for me. They came, all of them. Daniel brought a bottle of wine and small talk. Lillian showed up late, pretending not to notice the stained glass controller lamp Ivy kept staring at. My parents arrived together, stiff and overdressed, like they were attending a museum opening, not dinner with their estranged daughter. We ate, we talked, we danced around landmines. Until I decided to set the terms. "I want to be clear," I said, setting my glass down. "This isn't a reconciliation, not in the way you're used to." Everyone froze. I'm not slipping back into the family mold. I'm not erasing the last decade so we can pretend we're something we're not. I saw Catherine flinch. Franklin exhaled through his nose. Lillian suddenly became very interested in her napkin. "But I'm open to building something new," I continued. "Something honest, respectful, on level ground." "What does that mean?" Daniel asked. "It means," I said evenly, "we don't pretend anymore. We don't rewrite history to make it more palatable. You don't get to claim my success while ignoring the pain that came before it." I looked around the table. "And I don't need your approval, not anymore, but I'm willing to offer access, conditional, intentional access." Lillian tilted her head. "Access to me, my life, my time. This isn't a full circle reunion. It's a fork in the road. If you want to walk part of it with me, you'll do it knowing who I really am and respecting the distance I still need." My mother spoke softly. "And what do you need from us?" I paused, considering her. This version of her, quiet, less armored, she looked older in my lighting, realer. "Boundaries," I said, "and if you cross them, I reserve the right to walk away again." Ivy clapped. Actually clapped. Everyone turned to her, startled. She looked completely unbothered. "That was awesome," she said, "like a dialogue option in Consequence Protocol." I laughed. She got the reference. Of course she did. "Speaking of," I said, turning to her, "I've been thinking about what you said, about wanting to tell stories." Her eyes lit up. "Yeah? I want to mentor you. If you're serious, help you figure out the tools, the theory, all of it." Lillian tensed. "She has college prep, AP classes, and she's just a kid." "She's exactly the age I was when you all told me to grow up," I interrupted. "She doesn't have to choose now. She just deserves to know the choice exists." Ivy looked between us like she was watching a cutscene she'd never forget. "Can I?" she asked her mom quietly. Lillian sighed. "We'll talk about it." "You do that," I said. "But if you want this, Ivy, I'll make time." She nodded so hard her curls bounced. "I want this." Later that night, after the dishes were cleared and the air had shifted into something resembling tentative peace, Franklin asked if we could talk, just the two of us. We stood on the fire escape, city lights flickering below. He leaned on the railing, hands folded, voice low. "I don't know how to be your father anymore." "That's okay," I said. "I'm not asking you to be." He nodded slowly. "But maybe I could learn how to be something else, someone who supports you, even if it's on your terms. That would be a start." He looked out over the skyline, shoulders tight. "You know, I used to think success meant control, that if I built enough structure around my children, they'd never fall." "I didn't fall," I said. "I jumped. You just never saw me land." He laughed, but it was rough, honest. "You always were braver than I gave you credit for." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Some things are better left to settle in the silence. Before they left, my mother lingered at the door. She looked at me like she didn't want to say something, but knew she had to. "I used to think we lost you," she said. "Now I realize we just refused to see where you were going." I met her gaze. "And now? I see you." And for once, I believed her. Not because she said it perfectly, but because she didn't try to polish it. She just let it be human, imperfect, honest, and maybe, for the first time in a long time, real. 3 months later, I hosted Thanksgiving. Not out of obligation, and definitely not because I was trying to recreate some sanitized version of a family memory. I did it because, for the first time in years, I wanted to, on my terms. I sent the invitations myself, not just to my parents and siblings, but to the people who had stood beside me when everything fell apart. Colleagues who became friends, Marisol's niece who now ran creative ops at my studio, my neighbor who once lent me his Wi-Fi when I couldn't pay the bill, and Ivy, of course. Ivy arrived with her laptop and a backpack full of story drafts. We'd been doing weekly virtual sessions, reviewing her early scripts, talking narrative structure, emotional beats, and player agency. She had the spark, and now she had language for it. My family arrived just before dinner, awkward but present. Catherine brought a pie. Franklin wore a sweater that looked suspiciously casual for him. Lillian came alone, said Tom was traveling. No one asked further. Daniel helped set the table like it was a peace offering in flatware. The table stretched across 2 rooms, old wood, mismatched chairs, candles flickering between dishes of roasted vegetables and spiced cider. It wasn't Pinterest perfect. It was better. It was real. Over dinner, the conversations weaved between tech news, favorite books, and Ivy explaining the plot of the game she was designing with unfiltered enthusiasm. No one told her to tone it down. No one shut her down at all. At one point, I looked across the room and saw Franklin and Marisol's niece deep in conversation about brand storytelling. Catherine was in the kitchen showing Ivy how to whip cream without using a mixer. Daniel had somehow become the reigning champion of a very competitive game of Uno with my friends' kids. It didn't feel like resolution. It felt like reinvention. After dessert, I found Amalant alone on the balcony. The city below was alive with flickering windows and the occasional honk. I stood there, cup of coffee in hand, letting the breeze remind me how far I'd come. 10 years ago, I left everything behind with a laptop and a boundary no one respected. Now, I stood here, surrounded by people, blood and chosen, who had finally learned to meet me where I was, not where they expected me to be. I didn't get the apology I once dreamed of. Not all the scars faded, but I got something better, a new framework. Not a fairy tale ending, but a rewrite, with stronger character arcs and a protagonist who finally got to hold the pen. Before they left, my mother approached me quietly. Ivy showed me one of her scripts, she said. She's really good. She is, I replied. All she needed was someone to believe in her. Catherine hesitated. She's lucky to have you. I didn't say anything, but I let the compliment land. Just before the door closed, Ivy ran back and hugged me hard. I emailed you my new draft. It's the best one yet. I can't wait to read it. Later that night, I sat down at my desk, same one I bought secondhand in my 20s, paint chipped at the corners, and opened a blank document. Not a script, not a project brief, just a page. At the top, I typed, "A story is only over if you stop telling it." Then, I smiled and kept writing.
What about you? Have you ever had to rebuild yourself from scratch? Have you ever drawn a boundary that others refused to accept and stood by it anyway? If this story stirred something in you, I'd love to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments, your reflections, your questions, or just a quiet, "I see myself in this." And hey, if you found value here, don't forget to like and subscribe. There's more to come. More stories about strength, silence, survival, and the power of choosing your own ending. Thanks for listening all the way through. I see you, and I hope you see yourself too.